Good evening, Sat Sri Akal, Adab, Namaste, and welcome to the fifth of our specials, which we are doing in the month of August to celebrate Independence and Freedom Month. Today, it's barely 1 week after we witnessed the tragic fall of Kabul and what has been happening in our neighboring country. And we've seen the resurgence of the Taliban. What challenges this might pose for India and for our fragile region is something that will reveal itself in the coming weeks and months. Once it actually becomes clear that, what is this dispensation, this new regime that has now taken over, what kind of shape it's going to take. But to talk about India, on August the 14th, Prime Minister declared that henceforth, this day will be observed as Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. While we agree that the tragic memories of loss and bereavement, of death and destruction associated with that cleaving of the subcontinent must not be forgotten, should it be to make sure that such bloodletting never happens again? Or should it become one more occasion to spawn hate and to redefine the fissures and visions of the heart that seem to be creeping in? It's for all of these reasons that Marja House is talking about our freedoms and our rights as citizens of a free country. And on the occasion of this 75th year of independence, we really do think that it's time to recall what is truly remarkable about our country, which is home to multiple religions, faiths, ethnicities, languages, and cultures. This is something that we've celebrated over the years, and this is what we need to talk about again and again and to redefine for ourselves. Today, I'm delighted that we have with us Natasha Badhwar and Ghazala Wahab, and they're going to be talking about a really interesting, accessible, illuminating portrait of one of the largest and most diverse communities in India. Her book, around which our discussion is going to be framed, is called Born a Muslim. And the book not only tracks the history of Islam from the 7th century onward, but it also brings into focus what Islam is in India and what it means to be a Muslim in this country. Ghazala is about to join us. So before that, I think I'm going to ask Natasha to actually tell us a little bit about the book because she's read the book and I'm really keen to hear her opinion and what she thinks about it while we wait for Ghazala to actually join us. So Natasha Badhwar is a writer, columnist, activist, filmmaker, and media trainer. She leads the team at Caravan-e-Mohabbat, which is a people's campaign devoted to spreading the values enshrined in our constitution. So, Natasha, can I ask you to please talk to us a little bit about the book, and then we'll get Ghazala into the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Preeti, and everyone else at Marja House. I've heard so much about Marja House. My friends, fellow authors have been invited to Amritsar before. They have had sessions, particularly Shalim Hussain, a poet from Assam, Harsh Mandar, Navsharan Singh. They must all be familiar names to you. And through them, I have heard so much of Marja House, always kind of fantasized that one day I will go to Amritsar and I will visit this place. And as fate would have it, here I am online participating in a Marja House event. Amritsar does mean it has a personal take for me. My mother was born in Lahore, and in 1947, when my grandparents were one of the millions of refugees who crossed the border, Amritsar was the place where they first settled in. And we went back as children with my parents to find the house that my mother grew up in. And she was so excited And we went to the Golden Temple, and from there she traced the route back to her house. This is where hum yahan se jalebi kharidte the. She would name people who had lived in homes which didn't look like what they had earlier looked like, but she could still find that corner where they would go every evening to buy snacks for themselves. I've come back to Amritsar as a video journalist. We have, particularly with the theme of actually documenting partition stories. Every 15th August, the news cycle, it looks for some new way to remember, to commemorate, to honor the memories of those who have suffered and those who have survived, and find ways of reconciliation with that time, find ways to ensure that hatred, that violence can never be repeated again. And like Preeti said, this lot of events that you have organized, these book readings, these book discussions, are part of the same kind of effort. And to come to Ghazala Wahab's book, Born a Muslim, Ghazala had announced it many months before it actually came out. I follow her on social media. And when the pandemic lockdown first happened, Ghazala was worried about what would be the fate of her book, how much more delays would this book have to see. But lo and behold, it came out in the pandemic year. It came out at the peak of lockdown. It came out when publishing as an industry was really suffering because bookstores were closed, because book launches could not be organized in the way that we were used to. And authors were very, very worried about how their books will be received. And in that atmosphere, a book that talks about the stories, the aspirations, the conflicts of a minority community in India, the largest minority community, Muslims, who are very much a part of the ethos of India, who are very much a part of the identity of being Indian, for everyone to grow up alongside Indian Muslims. And yet we are at a time when this identity is being questioned, when it is being maligned, when it is being marginalized in a way that none of us remember ever having witnessed in our lived experiences. And at that time, this book comes out, and this book goes into reprints. It emerges a bestseller, online. It sells so many hardback copies. I mean, these are all the things that you worry about. Is it too expensive? Is it too thick? Is it too niche? And this is a book that has belied, all of those fears have fallen to the side as this book has journeyed on. And Ghazala has joined us, but I want her to hear this, and I want to show my copy of Born a Muslim to everybody who's with us today. Now, this is a copy that Ghazala sent to me, to read because we'd been connected. And this is a copy that was first read by my husband. My husband's name is Mirza Afzal Beg. He is an Indian Muslim, just like Ghazala Wahab. And he's not much of a reader, certainly not much of a non-fiction reader. But this is the way in which he has read this book. I mean, he's marked almost everything. He's read it 3 times, and half the book is yellow from the amount of marking that he's done in it. So I told him, you made it really easy for me to read because, I just need to go and find those portions that you've marked. But that's not how it worked out. When I began to read the book, I did discover that it's not just a well-researched nonfiction book. This is a book of stories. This is a book that it's like the memoir of a community. And it happens to also be a coming of age of the author herself. And I invite Ghazala to talk to us more about this journey I hope that in the next 1 hour that we have, 50 minutes that we have, we will be able to bring out as many facets of this book. We won't be, I worry that we will not be able to bring out everything we want to talk about, but we'll try to touch upon what we want to leave the audience with today. So I welcome Ghazala with this. I have done many, Zoom events in the year and a half that we've been stuck online, but this is really one of the most special of it. Ghazala, we spoke a while ago about what you might want to read from this book. And just to give a certain context to it, you start this book with a recalling of an incident in 1990 in Agra, where, and this is also something that you spoke about in your very first interview with Karan Thapar, and that video went viral because of the pain, the resonance that story had with everybody who heard it. 1990 is when the Rath Yatra was being taken out in India. It was just before the Babri Masjid was demolished. We were beginning to see a much more hardcore communalism in the public space than we had been used to. Our own notions of ourselves as a secular nation were being disturbed by what was going on, and particularly this Rath Yatra. And in that context, your family home in Agra, while you were all in it, and you were very young at that time, your brothers were with you, your parents were young, was attacked by a mob. And this is an Agra, a city that you had always belonged to, a city that your father was very confident of his position in, his social capital in. And when you saw a particular face in that mob, Sanjay Bhaiya, you were all reassured that they would not attack you because Sanjay Bhaiya was a friend of the family. But you write that was the moment, that attack. It may have only broken a few windows by the time you managed to fend off the mob. You may have come out of it unscathed physically, but it broke a trust. It broke a sense of safety in this, in the neighborhood where you live. And it fundamentally changed you as a person. Talk to us a little bit, perhaps in your mind, in your subconscious, you began to write this book on that day. And what has come out is a journey that started then. Share a little bit about that with us.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you so much, Preeti. And I would like to start by apologizing very, very profusely. I had no idea I would be caught so badly in the rain and the traffic, which usually follows the rain. So my apologies that I joined late. And thank you so much for this opportunity for all of you getting together to talk about this book, which I have actually described in the introduction. Also, I hope create some sort of a bridge between a bridge of conversation between the Hindus and the Muslims of India, so that if we have whatever misgivings and misunderstandings we have about each other, we are able to dispel those, I would also say, preconceived notions through conversation. So thank you once again for this opportunity. Now, coming to this incident of 1990, actually, I also have a slightly different perspective of it when you talk about a person who was familiar to the family, who was our neighbor as part of the mob. My father was confident that his presence would ensure that we wouldn't be harmed. And after that, they started throwing stones. But, Agra had been under this communal phase of communal violence for the previous 2 days. Our attack happened on the third day. And there was a very bad sort of violence. A lot of people were rendered homeless. The houses were burned. A person known to my uncle, his very close friend, his shop was burnt, and he lost a lot of, his entire consignment. He had a footwear shop. So a lot of people had suffered a great deal in those preceding 2 days. So when this mob had collected, we kind of sensed that what were the tools a mob would have. They'd have a patrol bombs, which they throw inside. And usually it happens in slightly plush households or households which invest a lot in doing up their houses, that you have carpets, you have a lot of woodwork, and you have curtains. So everything which is hugely inflammable. So our biggest concern was that if they throw something inside the house, once the windows are broken, then there's nothing much we could do, because our entire facade was made of, we had French windows, all of wood and glass. So, but thankfully, none of that happened. I mean, they threw stones and our windows were broken, the car was destroyed, and they moved on. So maybe in hindsight, that happened because of the presence of the person who was known to us. Maybe, we don't know. We never spoke to him about this, but maybe he did prevail upon the people that enough damage has been done. Let's move on to the next target. Or I don't know what transpired, because it's very difficult to predict how a mob would behave, and it is very difficult to understand the dynamics within the mob, who controls it, who doesn't control it, do they operate on their own. And I think that is what makes it so dangerous. So at that point, our fear and panic was really sky high, because my father and my uncle were two adult men at home, but I was there, my mother was there, my unmarried aunt was there. So there were women also. So there were so many things which were going through everybody's mind, that what could happen. Thankfully, none of that happened. And we all lived and thrived to tell the tale.
In your book, then you bring us to the present. You talk about an incident that took place in 2020. 2020 is fresh in everybody's memory, especially if they're a Delhiite. But when the violence broke out in Northeast Delhi, in retaliation to the anti-CA movement and the many protest sites that the streets of Delhi were hosting. Again, it was a violence that had been threatened. It had been announced. Ministers and leaders from the ruling party had threatened that they would do something like this as soon as the Delhi elections were over, and yet we watched it unfold in front of our own eyes. And you write about that with great feeling, and somewhere in it is something that every Indian needs to hear. Will you read to us that passage, Ghazala?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking me. This is one of the, I think, very sensitive portions which I debated whether I should put this in or not. So I'll start. On the afternoon of 25th February 2020, my father's youngest sister, who lives in Northeast Delhi with her husband, called me in a panic. A couple of days earlier, communal violence had broken out in parts of Northeast Delhi, triggered by virulent sloganeering and provocation by members of the BJP. The most prominent of these was "Desh ke gaddaron ko goli maro salon ko." It was not difficult to understand who the traitors were meant to be. The slogans were shouted by those who were part of the processions being taken out through the Muslim areas of Northeast Delhi by BJP leaders. In the just concluded Delhi state elections, the BJP had lost badly to the local Aam Aadmi Party. It was believed that the Muslims had voted en masse for the latter, shaping its huge victory, hence the anger against the Muslims. Muslims had also been holding peaceful demonstrations in various parts of Delhi since December 2019, protesting against the Citizenship Amendment Act, which allows for the fast-track citizenship of all migrants from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, except Muslims. The middle-level BJP leaders tried to harness the Hindu rage against Muslims for these protests, labeling the latter as anti-national. Finally, Heeding these calls to arms in the name of nationalism, mobs started attacking Muslims on the night of 23rd February 2020. Remembering what had happened in 1990, I started calling my aunt every few hours, urging her to move in with me for a few days. She continued to resist. It was not only about her immediate family, but her husband's extended family, all of whom lived there. Some even ran businesses in the locality. They had properties and investments in the neighborhood. "You expect me to abandon my whole life and run away?" my uncle bellowed on the phone. He hoped that the mob would not reach their area. That hope was not based on anything concrete. But what else could one do but hope? On 25th February, a mob reached the area where my aunt lives. Around 3 p.m., she called me. Armed assailants were at the head of the lane. The men of the neighborhood, including my 65-year-old uncle, were standing at the head entrance of the lane, armed with wooden staffs and bricks, in the hope of fighting off attackers armed with swords and country revolvers. "Can't you do anything?" she asked me. Do something. My mind raced. What could I do, sitting 25 kilometers away and in a different state? The fear, the helplessness, and the anger of 1990 returned. Although my family members were not harmed by the violence, when order was finally restored, the government put the total deaths at 53, of which 36 were Muslims. The most devastating aspect of this round of communal violence was the open and blatant prejudice showed by the Delhi police. Several videos shot by citizens have surfaced that show how the police in many parts of Delhi egged the mob on to attack Muslims. In some areas, the police left the scene of rioting so that violence could go on uninterrupted. In one particularly gory video, police personnel are seen repeatedly hitting injured men lying on the ground, forcing them to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai. One of those men died of his injuries later. When I started to write this book, what I wanted to do was address fellow Muslims and tell them that they needed to look beyond the mullahs and embrace modernity, because nothing in Islam tells them to stick to dogmas which are past their sell-by date. However, I increasingly became conscious of just how vulnerable Muslims in India are and how this made them extremely fearful to the exclusion of pretty much everything else. How does one tell people just struggling to stay alive that they need to change their thinking, their manner of living, their approach to religion?
Thank you, Ghazala. It's really chilling to hear a first-person account of violence, of societal violence, not just accidental violence. And it makes you think. It makes you think about your own role, your own passivity. Is there something we should be doing? How do we respond to this? We all kind of these questions churn inside of us. At what point did it become urgent for you to begin to write this book? After all, your areas of work are defense and security. You've been a security analyst, a political analyst, and you've written books about that. At what point did it feel that this is the book that you need to write?
I think maybe this book was there in me forever. The day I became conscious of my identity as a Muslim, and which was very early in life, not because I faced any prejudice, but because the atmosphere that I grew up in never failed to tell me that I was a Muslim. So I probably always felt that there are so many things that I want to tell others, and I wanted to tell Muslims that this is how a Muslim can also lead his or her life. But the most driving force or the most immediate force which pushed me into this was the change of government in 2014 and the normalization of prejudice. Even in the 90s and before the 90s, in the late 80s, there was some decency among people. If they would, even if they had prejudice against Muslims, or even if Muslims felt or had stereotyped Hindus in their mind, they won't articulate it in public, much less on the face of the other person. But I just remembered one anecdote. You know, when this 2003 happened in Gujarat, I used to take a shared auto with a doctor who used to work in one of the government hospitals, and my office in those days was on Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg, and her hospital was very close to that place. So, and we both were living in East Delhi. So we used to take this auto together. So when this happened, and she knew I was a Muslim. I mean, we had been doing this for a few months by then. And on my face after the Godhra incident, she just said that all of you need to be killed. And we were sitting together in the auto, and I was completely shocked that I wouldn't say something like this, even if I was feeling bad, and even if, as the violence was unfolding in Gujarat, and Gujarat was some, everybody saw it on television. It was probably the most televised violence that have happened in recent times. I mean, before the Delhi incident, Delhi violence. So I'm deliberately not using the word riots, because I think riot is a misnomer. Riot suggests a two-way traffic of violence. You know, somebody attacks and somebody retaliates. So I'm deliberately not using the word riot, because I don't think these incidents can be described as riots really. So I was really shocked, and I stopped taking the auto with her. I started making excuses. But her level of self-confidence or assurance was such that she did not think that I would stop taking the shared auto with her, even after hearing her say this, because maybe she thought, what is a big deal if she said this to me? I mean, I should be used to it by now, or isn't everybody also talking like this? So I don't know what drove her to say this, and what drove her confidence that she could still have this arrangement with me, which I stopped after that. So I think this normalization of an articulation of hatred is something which is unusual, not normal, and it is very disturbing to any human being, because it kind of, when you normalize something, then a benchmark is set, and then you wait for next stage of normalization, and then you don't even realize when you start diminishing as a human being, and you start devolving into something which is less than civilized human being. So I think this had been weighing on my mind for a very long time, but after 2014, things had started moving really fast. But I had another commitment. I was working on another book at that point. So the moment that book came out in 2017, I shot off the proposal for this book to my publisher, and I said, would you be interested in something like this? Their interest in the beginning was on a very theological kind of a look at Islam and Muslims in India, which I was not very comfortable with, primarily because I'm not an Islamic scholar. And I didn't think that if I was commenting on the theology of Islam, I would be taken very seriously. So it had to be something which drew from my experiences, where I could talk about my exposure to Islam, my lived-in experience in India, and how it has shaped me, my personality, and people that I know, or what we say, people like us, Muslims like us. So I thought that would be something I would be able to do justice to, and that is how the idea developed, and the book is here.
This actually leads very naturally into the next question. You've actually put it very well. Once one level of dehumanization and violence is normalized, we're simply just waiting for the next level. Just like your one-time friend thought that they shouldn't hurt you, you should be used to this, because that's what you're like, and you should know that. But when you speak about how you conceived of the book, you have also shared in your book that it was a learning process beyond what you had expected. That the book actually, the process of writing the book and of interviewing people exposed you to the lives of Indian Muslims and the challenges of being a Muslim in India in ways that your own lived experiences earlier had not. And many of your own notions were shattered. Tell us about those.
Barring this 1990 incident, I had had a very sheltered and privileged life, and I've never faced any kind of prejudice while growing up, while in school or college, even looking for rented accommodation. And I lived in rented accommodation in Delhi, all parts of Delhi, from South Delhi to East Delhi, for almost 12, 13 years until my father bought apartment here. So I never faced any problems, and all my landlords, landladies were not Muslims. Nobody ever had problems renting out a place to a Muslim. So when I started reading about these stories of and news reports of Muslims being denied accommodation, I could never relate to it because this was not my own experience. I always found very good neighbors, very good landladies, landlords, friends. And I had no Muslim friends because the atmosphere that I grew up in, the school I went to, I was the only Muslim girl in my class. So there was no question of having a Muslim friend. Or subsequently in my college, again, in my class, I was the only Muslim girl and there was one more Muslim boy in my class. But we didn't become friends then. So my exposure was very, it was somebody who was looking inside the community from outside. So because I did not see the fears that an average Muslims in India feel. I didn't experience the insecurities, the struggle they have with education, the struggle they face in terms of getting jobs. So all of this was a learning experience for me. A sense of insecurity, a little bit of insecurity started trickling into me after 2014. And that was primarily because when we started hearing things about lynching and, the cultivation of mobs. And why I'm saying cultivation is during a communal incident or a violence, there is a mob. A lot of times it is not an impromptu and not a natural organic mob, it is created mob or whatever. But here there were mobs were being created even in the absence of communal tension. Suddenly there was a vigilant group checking people, what you are working with, why you are a cattle trader or what you are supplying from one place to another, or there was a vigilant mob checking who's the girl you're talking with sitting in a park or things like that. My own younger sister, when she decided to get married, and her husband is not a Muslim. But the biggest concern, apart from the fact that my parents took a little coming around that she wants to marry a Hindu person, but once that hump was crossed, the biggest challenge was how do they get married? Because if you apply to a magistrate's office, they put a notice, and the atmospherics post 2014 was so bad that anybody could raise an objection. It was not really classical love jihad, but it was not a Muslim man marrying a Hindu woman, but in retaliation, some hardline Muslim organizations could protest or do something or the other. So that was a big concern. So we had to find a way getting around that how do we escape this bit of putting a public notice, that waiting period, how do we short circuit? So, well, privilege and its influence helped in that. So we managed to do that. But you can imagine how difficult it is for an average person to even do this. So all of this, it has kind of created this sentiment of otherness, which I was not familiar with until the last 4, 5, or 6 years. And this has been a learning experience that I actually came down from my pedestal and I experienced what an average person feels, that because my story or my circumstances are not an average person's circumstances. And I'm using this word average very consciously because an average actually is the majority.
Yeah. So far, we've been talking about societal prejudice. We've been talking about, communities and how they see each other through this kind of prism of hatred not necessarily hatred of prejudice. What you have also done very, very exhaustively in this book is explore the role of the state. And not only explore the role of the state in the last 7 years when it has become openly Islamophobic. And, it wears it like a badge of honor, the current government, but of looking at the Indian state's experiments with secularism and where they faltered. What were the moments when narrow-minded politics actually came in the way of building the nation that we had all collectively agreed to build as a secular society. How deep did that take you, and what were the revelations that you found?
I think the biggest revelation for me was how a narrative of persecution at the hands of Muslims was deliberately constructed by a group of people who felt that they needed this creation of an enemy to mobilize people who they thought would build the new India with the exclusion of the Muslim community. Because in our reading of history as a school going, as a student, whether in school or subsequently in college, this this history of violence, which later on has become so normalized, we were not acquainted with this. Now it is dismissed as a left-leaning whitewash of history, but subsequently also because I have been interested in history, I had a amongst my reading, I was always been less of a fiction reader. I've more been a non-fiction reader all my life, and I have interest in a lot of history. I've had interest in a lot of current events, even while growing up. So I never found anything which would now support the kind of stories we hear now. So I think this was a big reveal that how did these stories were manufactured? What was the thinking which went behind this? I never really focused much on the RSS and RSS background, how it came about, the early experiences that Hegdawar faced in with the Muslims in his area where he used to live in Nagpur. So all of this was a big reveal. How Savarkar, actually a very progressive, erudite person at one point, how he was reading up Italian writers and Italian ideologues, and kind of putting that on the Indian template. So from my perspective, because I had never not focused so much on this area, this was a big reveal that how this construct was made to fit the Indian template. The other one was that how deep this influence was. That at one point I always thought that the Congress, even the pre-independence Congress, was a very straight-jacketed party. All very progressive, very liberal people. So this bit that because of the dual membership, there were a lot of people from the Hindu Mahasabha who were part of the Congress, and how in the early years leading up to the partition and subsequently after the partition, how deliberately sectarian politics was surreptitiously brought into main policy making, even in the writing of the constitution when it was very liberal, but subsequent judgments of the Supreme Court by the courts, high courts and Supreme Court ensured that the liberalism of the constitution was interpreted in manner which suited a particular kind of belief or particular kind of opinion makers in India. So all of this has been a huge, I would say, exposure to our own realities and our own history. So then it is understandable the journey that we have traveled in the last 75 years. And I've said this before also, that despite all this deliberate and a very concerted program, clearly our roots of communal harmony and roots of Ganga Jamni was so deep that it took so many years to, for the erosion to happen. We withstood this despite the very, very bitter experience of the partition. We managed to withstand all of this for almost 40, 45 years. We did not allow this sort of divisiveness to enter our public discourse, our politics until last 20 years.
To be honest, this is precisely what makes your book so topical and so relevant at this time. When it's hard to tell how much erosion has taken place and how much simply, the voices of pluralism or the voices that believe in a secular ethos have been silenced. It's difficult to tell. I mean, it's a conversation we have constantly, in the workplace as well as in personal circles. Is it just that the people who are, expounding so much hate today, are they just a very few people who are very loud and have been given a platform and have, been given impunity? Is it just that? Or is it actually that, that we have crossed a threshold, that we have actually lost something that we may not be able to reclaim? And I very much veer towards thinking, especially because, and I'm sure that's been your experience as well, especially because when we create, films and videos and articles and books that reach out to audiences, they latch on to it and come back to us with their stories. And I want to ask you, so for example, when we work at the Karwan-e-Mohabbat and we make these short films, people who don't want to publicly look like, they are anti-Hindutva will send us personal messages. They will congratulate us. They will give us strength. And I wanted to ask you if that's been your experience since the book has come out.
Actually, I would agree with you entirely. I have received a lot of very positive, very favorable response from the most unlikely quarters. I have heard from people, and I'm not talking of Muslims, I've heard from people, Hindu senior military officers, and I don't think this is, I never imagined this would be something that a military officer would want to read. But because I know of so many military officers because of my work, so when they learned that I have written a book like this, so out of curiosity, they wanted to read and they bought. So many have written back to me saying that it has been an eye-opener. And, the chapter on marginalization has been particularly disturbing for them. And they never imagined that this is the history of post-independence India. One of them said that it has embarrassed me, that, we've been guilty of doing all this. So was that your intention, to embarrass the majority community? I said, no, it was never my intention. My intention was always to just present the story the way I think has happened. It's I'm not saying it's an alternate view. I don't think this is an alternate view, because I have, these are these are cited incidents from media reports, from articles, from various places. So it's not that I'm presenting an alternate reality, but I'm just presenting the reality as it happened. It may have been very bitter for some people. It may have been shocking for others, but the truth is, unless we face up to it, we will not be able to understand the compulsions of the other people. We will not be able to understand why they behave in a particular manner. I mean, even I did not understand why Muslims prefer to live in underdeveloped ghetto. Why don't they move out? I mean, we have never lived in a ghetto. I always sought to live in uh, always in a mixed locality, because my father also felt that I don't want too many Muslims around me. And I also kind of grew up with that thinking, and I continue to live in mixed localities, never sought a place which was a Muslim dominated area. So I just couldn't understand why Muslims do not want to do this. Why don't they allow themselves to be mainstreamed? Until I wrote this, I just could not understand what drove their insecurities. So,
yeah. So in a sense, a book like this gives us an opportunity to stand in the shoes of the person who has been victimized by these false narratives. You know, it may not be a violence that is visible because it doesn't hurt you physically, but it pushes you back. It changes your mindset. It changes you as a person, and like you say in the book, also, you know, that those fears get ingrained in you.
Absolutely. And I think fear is a very it operates at different levels. I mean, for some people it completely immobilizes you, and for some people, I mean, it adds defiance to your behavior. You know, you just want to then assert yourself even more, or you want to actually relive the stereotype that is being thrust on you, beat the stereotype that is being pushed on you. So I think everybody responds differently, but majority or an average person's response is always self-preservation. And then you seek security in numbers. You want to just huddle together with your own kind. At least there, the everyday fear is not there. I mean, in that person's perception, that at least you can lead a daily life without constantly watching over your shoulders. Of course, if that doesn't hold true in a lot of cases, because whenever there's an incident, terrorist violence or supposed terrorist incident, these are the places which are the picking grounds for the police to go and pick up people. So I think even that security does not really exist in real sense. But until that happens, at least you feel that you are among your own.
So I'll ask you a last question. We really seem to, with every new world incident, every new incident in India, seem to be crossing into a space from where it seems like there will be no coming back, or you know, it seems like it's how are we going to recover from this? I'm talking about vigilante mobs in Delhi's Jantar Mantar last week, you know, sloganeering in Haryana and West UP over the last 1 month, videos all over social media where they're talking about, they're threatening violence, they are promoting violence, but the state is refusing to act. I'm talking about what has happened in Afghanistan in front of our very eyes over the, you know, it's only just, it kind of broke on us with the death of Danish Siddiqui, and that, you know, something of a very grave nature was unfolding in Afghanistan, and now we don't know how many more horrors we are going to witness. So in the midst of all this, where do we see the hope? I mean, what is it? What would you say to the young person, to anybody who wants to be in some way influential in trying to restore peace amidst this kind of anarchy?
I think the biggest source of hope right now is people like you. You know, despite all sorts of pressures and ganads being spread, this movement that you have started with Mr. Harshmandar, I think this has been such a uplifting movement. It kind of, and I think as the couplet goes, that मैं अकेला ही चला था जाने पे मंजिल, लोग आते गए कारवां बनता गया, and I think that is how this कारवां is growing. And I think this is something which is again, I won't say it's a fig leaf, but I think this is something, it is like a light which is drawing more and more people towards it. And if more people start questioning what they are being told day in, day out by propagandists, by mischievous WhatsApp forwards about distortions of history, if they start questioning it even a wee bit, I think answers are not difficult to find. The easiest answers is just to ask. And if you reach that level that you actually want to ask a question, I think that is a very that's a first step which holds a lot of promise. And I feel it's a lot of people today who are doing this, who are making this effort of dispelling these sorts of this kind of a historically skewed narrative. I mean, I see this website, there's Alt News, such a commendable work they are doing in debunking fake news. There are so many others. I mean, I can't think of anybody else at the moment, but it's be unfair of me to say that only these people are doing fantastic work. But there are so many people that I have come to know in the last few years, and it completely astounds me that despite the hatred which is targeted in their direction, they have managed to keep this flame of courage going. So I think this is a fantastic thing that is happening, and this can only grow. And I don't think we need to worry too much that we have reached a point of no return. I don't think we are there yet.
Absolutely, Ghazala. We have to keep telling stories, we have to keep the dialogue open, and we have to keep creating. As writers, as artists, we have to keep creating, because that's where the stories will live. I invite questions from the audience. Preeti, should we go ahead with that?
Yeah, I think there was already one from Rana China. I'll just read that one out, and then I'm hoping more questions will come in. Rana China says, it greatly saddens me that we are at this pass as a nation 75 years after independence. This is not what our founding fathers envisaged for the state. How do we resist this attempt to change the fundamental character of our social fabric, given that the bothering of the Muslim is not only based on a political strategy, but also on an ideological belief? You want to take that?
Yes, I think as I said in the last answer to Natasha, that the only way forward is to continue telling the stories and let everybody tell their stories, so that we can flood the mindscape with these stories of positivity, these the stories, the truth, which has been the lived experience in India. This Ganga Jamni that is very maligned right now, this cohabitation, codependence, mutual, it has been at various levels. Our heritage has been of interdependence in professional sphere, in cultural sphere, and even in personal sphere to some degree, not too much. So these are the lived experiences of people of India. And I think if we hold on to these, and if we keep telling stories about these lived experiences, we will be doing a great job towards reducing this polarization, this vilification that goes on today.
I think, Natasha, there's another one about young people. You can see now, I think. It's been open.
Yeah. So there's a comment from Parveen, no questions, just mesmerized by the talk. Looking forward to reading the book. I'm so happy to do it. And here is a question from Gina. It's very sad to state that most of the youth today are growing up with divisive feelings against the Muslims, particularly college students. How do you think that mindset can be changed?
This is Swabera Islam. Sorry.
You know, I have thought about this myself many times, because unfortunately, this is a very fundamental problem in India. Our education level is extremely poor. We have reduced it to the lowest common denominator. Maybe we wanted to broad base our education. So everything is a multiple choice question now. So there is no scope for ancillary reading. There's no scope for discussion even in the classroom. The answers are given to you beforehand. So I think that I don't know how at the level of youngsters who are educated or who are being taught false narratives and which are being passed off as history. I don't know how this can change unless we really change the way we teach our people. I'm not saying we need to change the syllabus, but I think the whole method of teaching must be changed in some way, where we encourage young people to ask questions, we encourage young people to reflect on what is being taught to them. Maybe we should encourage them to write papers, even if small papers, from very early on. I mean, why should only a MPhil or a PhD student write papers? I mean, why shouldn't a student of class 8 or 10 write, even if it's a small or short paper, just talking about what he or she has understood? And then, but the problem is, then where do you get the teaching staff which can look at this? I mean, it's a very, I mean, I have no answers to this problem. I've seen this with my own nieces and nephews, and I despair at the level of education that is being imparted to them.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that is influencing not only the youth but everyone is that hate is being rewarded.
Absolutely.
We are living in a time where violence is being rewarded, where hate is being rewarded, so long as it is directed towards a particular community. And then you have mass unemployment. Then you have a sliding economy. And it's very easy to recruit, foot soldiers for this kind of hate violence.
Absolutely.
And in a way, the counter to that we witnessed in the anti-CA movement, which was led by the youth, which started on the campuses, which was held on to by the most unlikely, groups, Muslim women, mothers, and campus students, students that we had been writing off for not being analytical enough, were talking, giving live interviews to TV cameras and calling out the Prime Minister, calling out the state and saying that I may not be Muslim, but I'm not going to let this happen to my classmate, with so much passion. So somewhere we are in a time where that sentiment is not being harnessed. And on the other hand, somebody who is willing to pick up a gun and shoot or hurl a stone towards the minority group will get a political position or will get a well-paid job.
Those weeks, 7-8 weeks, or I think maybe more of the CA protests, they seem now of another time, another place altogether. It was such a uplifting moment. I used to watch it on phone, the videos which are being circulated. It was the most wonderful thing that has happened in India in a very, very long time. The kind of creativity that was oozing out from everybody, the kind of poetry that emerged, the kind of sloganeering that emerged. There was a video of young girls taunting Delhi police officers कि हमारे साथ चलो, हम युवा हैं, बात करेंगे ना कि जूता लात करेंगे. I mean, it was amazing, the setting to tune of slogans. I mean, fantastic that moment was.
So just going to read some more comments. Sangamitra, Narendrajit Kaur She says, why do we engage in such mass episodes of hatred again and again? Is it an agenda politically forced upon us? And the intellectual mind is numb not to react and respond or do anything collectively. None of us want this at an individual level, but as a collective, are we that weak? And I'll just read Bernard de Silva's comment. As a non-Muslim, I often wonder, how does one keep getting the strength and courage to keep getting up after being knocked down daily through open discrimination and now heightened Islamophobia? Would you like to respond to these?
I think it's a very touching question, and I don't know where this courage comes from. Maybe it comes from the belief of that tomorrow will be a better day and things may change. And every now and then, especially after the CA protest, we keep hoping. A lot of people keep thinking that something like this, if it, if it is sustained, we are hit by COVID, but after this, hopefully, if this kind of momentum of people coming together, irrespective of religion, irrespective of caste and economic background, if they can come together to for a common cause and a cause of reclaiming our lost heritage, or a heritage which is being very violently being torn asunder. So I think this hope is what sustains people. And I think it's not just the Muslims, it's also Hindus who are hoping or who are working towards restoring this heritage or holding on to this heritage. I think all of us are in the same boat. Our struggle is the same.
We have Sangamitra Malik. The WhatsApp forwards are extremely dangerous. There is a group of people with the blessings of the government who are spreading hatred about the Muslim community. People must ignore these and not go on forwarding these. How do we make people understand this? Then Gurupdesh Singh says, do you think the Indian reaction to Muslims, perhaps he means the Hindu or this reaction to Muslims, is a kind of backlash of the militant assertion of Islam by certain groups globally? Pathika Verma says, it's like in your own house, some family members are always singling you out and bringing you down. Kudos to my Muslim brothers and sisters who rise above this. More power to you. Narinderjit Kaur says, do we lack rational thinking that we follow false notions told by others? Ina Singh says, they probably react as per what's going on around them. Ramakrishna Dulam says, Ghazala madam, what do you think about the portrayal of Muslims as terrorists, mainly in Indian movies that talk about Indo-Pak wars? Do you want to kind of respond collectively to these?
Actually, I'll respond to this in the earlier one also about Muslim terrorists and extremists that we see all around. I think this again has been a part of a very concerted effort to portray Muslims or Islam as a religion which doesn't like living or coexisting with others. And here again, I have written this in the book, in this chapter on marginalization of the Muslim community. This is not an India, this narrative is not exclusive to India. This was built by the colonial powers, and not only because in India, but all through their colonies. Because if you see the colonial history, whether it was in English or French, most of the countries that they had colonized were Muslim countries. So when the revolt against the colonial rule started, it was led primarily by Muslims. And obviously, if it's a violent revolt or if it's a military revolt, there would be killings and there would be atrocities committed on both sides. As we saw in 1857 also, there was a lot of atrocities committed by the revolutionaries, the British women, against British women and children as well. And when the retaliation happened, again, British committed a lot of atrocities. People were hanged and killed en masse. So it was a series of these revolts that the British were experiencing in their colonies from North Africa to the Middle East and then India, that led to the vilification or caricaturing of Muslims as extremely violent people. And when the Hindu supremacists, I would call them supremacists, when they started building their narrative, they borrowed all of this trope from the British narrative. Also, the narrative of the evangelicals who were trying to convert the local population. So this is a borrowed narrative. If you just sit back and think rationally, where do you find Muslim terrorists? Which part of the world do you find Muslim extremists? And are there any Muslim extremists in India? Where do you find, how are Muslim extremists impinging upon your life? If you look at India, the biggest problem we have is in Kashmir. Then if you just think back why we have a problem in Kashmir, you realize that it's a political problem. It is not that suddenly Muslims of Kashmir have woken up and they said, no, we don't want any Hindus around us. It was a hangover of partition. It was a carry forward of the two-nation theory and whatever assurances were given at that point. So it's a lingering political problem, which found its violent manifestation in 1989 for various reasons, which I'm not going to get into. The Middle East, again, everybody keeps using this example to cite that, look at the Middle East, the Muslims are always fighting and they're always blowing up, the suicide bombers. You see the history of this region. All of these issues, they all have political antecedents, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Iraq or Syria, what is this place called Lebanon, all of this has a political context to it. So if you remove these places where you see violence, and the victims of the violence have essentially been Muslims themselves. So if you remove these areas, where do you find violence? Where do you find terrorism in mainland India? Where are your Muslim terrorists here? So I think this is a propaganda that has carried on, and everybody kind of accepts this as fact, which is a very unfortunate thing. It has to be dispelled at all levels, and we can't expect our political leadership to do that because they have been complicit in propagating these myths. So I think it can only be done at the level of the citizens, that we need to see things in context. We need to see things in the background and see how things have come to this pass today. I feel if political grievances are left unattended for too long, they usually find an outlet in violence. And if within that within that violent group, if you discredit the moderates, then you are actually encouraging or you're creating space for the radicals. So the more you discredit moderates, more radical elements you create. And with the more conflict remains unresolved, it continues, you creating more fertile grounds for radical elements to emerge. And then it becomes even more easier because the radical elements are actually living the stereotype you put on them. Then they are terrorists, then they are primitive, then they're medieval, then they're barbaric, then they're everything, because you have fostered this sense of exclusion. You have fostered this discrimination over the years. And I'm not talking about India per se, I'm talking about, because the question said all over the world. So I'm basically answering that wherever you find these problems, you will find an outburst in violence. Violence cannot be removed, could not be taken out of the political problem. No person who has no grievance will start suddenly one day get up and blow him or herself up. If you remember, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had told very proudly, I don't know who he said this to, I've forgotten, I think the visiting American president, that he's extremely proud of the fact that no Indian Muslim has joined Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And even today, according to the Government of India statistic, there's something like 42 or 43 cases of Muslims having joined ISIS. In a country of, where 14% population is Muslim, if 42 have joined them, it's a non-existent number.
Thank you,
So,
Ghazala.
Natasha, we also got some questions from Facebook. Do you want to take those? I think Tarunjit has just joined. He sent a question, and then there are a couple others from Facebook.
Okay, so will you share them with us? Those
I
questions?
think Tarunjit has joined, and he's put something here, but what he says is every case of denied justice by the state increases impunity. Emotional violence takes decades to heal. So that was one. And then Muhammad Faisal has said, his question is, in these times of hate being normalized, what extent do you think one should go being ignorant and accommodating before turning to being confrontational and questioning?
I think, sorry, can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
I don't think you should be ignorant about it. Accommodating, yes. And I think if you're accommodating, maybe at some level, you should also start telling that other person or people who are judging you or who have preconceived ideas about you, and you could dispel their misgivings about you. I think it's a responsibility of everyone who knows the truth to tell the other person that, look, what you are saying is not correct. It is not just the responsibility of Muslims. I think it's responsibility of every citizen of India. If you know something to be false, please call it out.
Yeah, we've got some affirming comments from Rana. Love must prevail over hate each and every time. We must believe in and continue to strengthen our basic civilizational beliefs and values. Sanjoy Hazarika, what emerges through the comments in Ghazala's own lived experience is how to create goodwill where there is ill will that is at the heart of reclaiming the future. A key issue is addressing the appeasement of a majoritarian narrative. And Dipali has written that this chaotic churning is bringing clarity as well. It is bringing a huge community together and very strongly. Earlier, from not standing for everyone, now people speak up and stand even for strangers. So maybe that's a silver lining.
Absolutely.
And then there's a question about women. So again, Tarunjit Butalia saying, how do we increase the space of Muslim women in today's world without them becoming irreligious?
Actually, religion itself says nothing against Muslim women not being part of inclusive society. The first woman who embraced Islam was the first wife of the Prophet Muhammad, and she was a professional woman. She was a woman who was the biggest, one of the biggest businesswoman in Arabia, and she had the largest caravans traversing Mecca and other areas. So, and she was the one who proposed marriage, and there's nothing in Islam which has said or told women to dress up in a particular way, to cover themselves up in a particular way, or to study only select subjects and not others, or to do certain kind of jobs and not others, or not do any job at all. This has nothing to do with religion, really. Today, when a lot of Muslims and especially women who want to cover themselves up and in the name of religion, I think they're doing a great disservice to the religion. They're actually maligning the religion. The religion doesn't tell them to dress up in a particular way. Islam has no dress code, either for women or men. The only thing it says is that both men and women have to be modestly dressed, and they should lower their eye when they come in presence of another sex, the opposite sex. So this commandment is for both men and women. As far as covering up is concerned, there is a verse which talks of covering up, but it doesn't specify what it means by covering up. It says you need to cover yourself up so that you are not identified and harassed. But this came specifically for the wives of the Prophet who used to go at night to for their ablutions. And there was a group of bandits which used to hang around that area, and they used to harass women who used to come out there. So there was an incident of one of the wives being harassed. So then it was said that if they cover themselves up in a particular manner which conveys that they are Muslims and they're wives of the Prophet, then the bandits would not dare harass them. So this was for their security. But this injunction was not for all women, and certainly not for working women, because women used to work even then. I mean, women used to work on the land. They were part of the the tillers, and so it was not for everybody. Then women used to accompany the warriors, because they couldn't leave the women behind when the wars were being waged. And there are incidents of women being part of the Muslim armies and fighting the wars as part of the army. So all of this suggests that within the parameters of that tribal society and primitive society, I mean, we're talking of the 7th century, they did try and bring about as much fair play in a woman's role as was possible, given how strong tribal codes were, which is why a lot of tribal elements, of tribal justice elements, crept into Islam, because they just won't relent. The warlords or the tribal chieftains would argue and say, no, but this is our family tradition. That is how female circumcision came into Islam, though the Quran says nothing about female circumcision. Even male circumcision, it says nothing. So, so these were the practices which were prevalent in those areas and which crept into Islam for the simple reason those people wouldn't relent. So I think a Muslim woman can be perfectly devout, can be religious, say prayers all 5 times or 7 times, how many times she wants to say, or fast as many days in the year as she wants to, and still be progressive in thought, still be progressive in conduct. She could still be working, she could still study, do whatever she wants. The biggest, and it's easier said than done, because the biggest factor which comes in the way of doing all this is insecurity. As I discovered in the course of my research, that one of the reasons that the Muslim respondents gave to Justice Sachar was that because they didn't have adequate schools or good quality schools or higher secondary schools in their area, they could not send their daughters after a certain point to schools, because they were worried about sending them outside their locality. For instance, if they're living in a particular Muslim-dominated area and there aren't any schools, those girls had no way of approaching or accessing modern education, because the parents wouldn't send them out for fear that anything bad can happen to them if a riot breaks out, or if somebody just wants to do mischief with them. So the biggest factor which is holding women back is insecurity, because across religion, across societies, patriarchy has deemed that the honor of the family, everything resides in the body of the woman. So that body is sacrosanct and it has to be protected at all costs.
In fact, this is a very significant part of Ghazala's book, Born a Muslim. We had very much planned to talk about this, but we kind of ran out of time. She systematically and very, very methodically looks at all the myths about Islam that are promoted and are prevalent within the community as well. And the entire debate about what is in the Quran, what is in the Hadith, what is allowed and what is not allowed, she explores it in a very, very humane way, telling us stories. And you come out of it feeling so much lighter, because you're shedding your own prejudices as you kind of carry on, and it makes so much sense when Ghazala puts it out there. So I'm glad one of the questions kind of gave her the platform to speak about this. Preeti, how should we?
No, I just wanted to say this has been a really fascinating conversation, and thank you very much, Natasha, and thank you, Ghazala, because I've almost finished the book. I can't say that I've finished it, but I have found it totally fascinating, and I said in the beginning, illuminating, because just like Natasha said, I mean, one has had classmates and both in school and college, but somehow you know, you never ever thought about half of the things that have come out through the book that I read. And, you know, the beginning of the way you begin from a personal story, a memoir of your own family, and how then things start to change. And that actually is what, for me, is the crux of the book, that things begin at a certain point, but circumstances around you, people around you, things that happen which are not in your control often, that is actually what impacts not only an individual or a family or a community, but that's actually what starts, you know, all these changes start to happen. And again, as somebody that comes from a minority, I don't know, the book actually really speaks to me. So I would say thank you very much for that. And I'm going to ask Indu Arora, who's also a founder member of Maja House, to please come in at this point and say our formal thank yous to the two of you for being here today with us.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And what an insightful, beautiful session, I must say. Congratulate you both for the book, Born a Muslim, and Maja House also, Preeti Gill, for bringing this forward to us, you know. And so many things that we, you know, that we didn't know about, and they were unraveled with your book. And I think the importance of dialogue in a country as diverse as India is important for everyone to understand the sensitivities of different groups and religions. Understanding achieved through respect is glue that will keep the country unified. And the books such as Ghazala's, you know, is speaking awareness, bringing in an awareness. The pen is mightier than the sword. We all know that, yeah? But the only thing I feel is only educated will understand the pen is mightier than the sword. And whereas we have very headstrong, uneducated people around who are the ones who create so much of fear among people, the common people. And I think any minority community is at danger at times. Because if I don't want to recall now, but there are many happenings that have happened and over the, you know, time. And after partition, we should have all learned a lesson, you know. I mean, that was a very horrifying experience for our older generation. And the conditioning has to start from the homes, where the elderly, you know, have to kind of, you know, groom the children and explain to them the horror of such violence and hatred and whatever. I mean, today is such a fearful, you know, scenario everywhere. So, but I would like to end this session. Thank you so much, Ghazala Wahab and Natasha Badhwar, for the beautiful book, Born a Muslim. And I think it should be a read for everyone. So now I end with the Tagore's, you know, this thing, where the mind is without fear. Okay, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow walls, by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, and where a tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way. Into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee, into the ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. And we should all kind of, you know, put in our contribution to try and educate the people, minorities or majorities, whoever they are. You know, it's a binding together for India, and India is a secular country. Nobody can break it into fragments. And we all, you know, especially your reading and your writing and all that, it can influence a lot. And I think we should all strive for a better and a harmonious India from today or ever. You know, that's something we should all work on. So thank you so much, Maja House and Preeti Gill and Ghazala and Natasha. And we've had a wonderful conversation, very insightful, I must say.
And let's just tell people about tomorrow, because we have a couple of things tomorrow in the evening at 6 o'clock, same time. Please join us. We have a discussion on growing up Jewish in India. Again, a very small minority, but something we need to talk about. And also, I think something we know very little about. So we have a talk on that. And then we have another talk half an hour on Afghanistan and what is happening over there. So do join us at 6 o'clock tomorrow. We promise to let you go in an hour and a half tomorrow. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, and apologies once again for running late.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
not
you,
at all.
Natasha, and
Thank
thank you,
you.
Ghazala. Wonderful session. God bless.
Thank you so much.
Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.